They told the world the Alpha King was a myth, a monster made of shadows and blood who would devour anyone foolish enough to cross his borders. But deep in the freezing dungeons of the Blackwood Pack, Elara Vance found him. He wasn't a monster then. He was a wolf, broken and bleeding, bound by silver chains that burned his flesh. Every instinct she had screamed at her to run, to leave him, to die. But she didn't. She reached out. She unlocked the chains. She expected him to run. Instead, the massive beast shifted into a man with eyes like molten gold, grabbed her wrist and whispered a single word that changed her life forever. Mine. This is the story of how a servant girl freed a king, and how the king burned the world down to keep her. You won't believe the twist in the final chapter. Let's begin. The winter in the Northern Territories didn't just make you cold. It tried to kill you. The wind howled like a dying animal, rattling the thin glass of the servants' quarters, where Elara Vance scrubbed the floor until her knuckles were raw. Elara was 22, a human living in a world dominated by shifters. Specifically, she was the property of the Blackwood Pack, led by the sadistic Alpha Silas. She wasn't a slave by law, but she was by debt. Her father had gambled away everything before disappearing, leaving Elara to work off a sum that Silas ensured never decreased. "You missed a spot, rat," a voice sneered. Elara didn't look up. She knew it was Jack Silas's beta. He kicked the bucket of dirty water, sending the freezing grey slosh over her worn boots. "Clean it up. Then take the slop bucket to the old ruins behind the estate. Alpha Silas says we have a guest." Elara froze. The ruins were forbidden. They were the remnants of the old castle that stood before the Blackwood Manor was built. No one went there. It was said to be haunted by the ghosts of wolves who went feral. "A guest?" Elara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Don't ask questions," Jax growled, grabbing a handful of her hair and yanking her head back. "Just feed it. And if you let it loose, Silas will skin you alive in the town square." "Understood." "Understood," she gasped. He shoved her away and stormed off. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. She grabbed her heavy wool coat, 3 sizes too big and smelling of mothballs, and picked up the bucket of raw, bloody meat scraps intended for the guest. The trek to the ruins was brutal. Snow crunched under her boots, the white expanse stained blue by the moonlight. The ruins were a skeletal jaw of jagged stones rising from the earth. As she approached the rusted iron grate that led to the cellar, she heard it. It wasn't a growl. It was a whimper. Low, guttural, and laced with an agony so profound it made Elara's stomach turn. She pushed the heavy grate aside the hinges, screaming in protest, and descended the stone steps. The air grew colder, smelling of damp earth iron and something else, burning flesh. At the bottom of the stairs, in a cell barred with reinforced steel, lay the largest wolf Elara had ever seen. It was midnight black, its fur matted with dried blood. But what drew her eye were the chains. Thick, glowing silver chains were wrapped around the wolf's neck, paws, and torso. Where the metal touched the fur, smoke rose. Silver was poison to wolves. It burned them like acid. The wolf lifted its head. Its eyes were shut, swollen from beatings, but as she stepped closer, they cracked open. Gold. Not the yellow of a common wolf, but deep, metallic gold, flecked with ancient amber. The beast didn't lunge. It didn't snarl. It looked at her with a terrifying intelligence. It looked at her, pleadingly. "Who are you?" Elara whispered, dropping the bucket. The meat spilled onto the floor, but the wolf ignored it. His gaze was fixed on her. She stepped closer to the bars, entranced. She knew she should dump the food and run. Silas killed people for less than hesitation. But looking at this creature, seeing the silver searing into his muscle, she felt a strange pull in her chest, a thrumming vibration like a plucked guitar string. The wolf shifted, dragging the heavy chains. A low sound rumbled in his chest, not a threat, but a greeting. Elara reached her hand through the bars. "Don't," she whispered to herself. "You'll lose your hand." But she didn't stop. Her fingertips brushed the coarse black fur of the wolf's muzzle. A spark, hot and electric, shot up her arm and settled in her heart. The wolf leaned into her touch, exhaling a breath that fogged in the cold air. And then she saw the lock. It wasn't a modern padlock. It was an ancient iron mechanism holding the silver chains to the wall, and hanging on a hook just outside the cell, tauntingly out of the wolf's reach, was the key. Silas was arrogant. He assumed no wolf could reach it, and no human would dare touch it. Elara looked at the key. Then she looked at the golden eyes of the suffering beast. "If I do this," she whispered, trembling, "I'm dead." The wolf pressed his forehead against the bars, looking at her with an intensity that stripped her soul bare. It was a silent promise. "Free me and I will protect you." Elara Vance, the girl who had never broken a rule in her life, grabbed the key. The key was cold and heavy, made of iron that bit into her palm. Elara's hands shook so violently she almost dropped it. Above her, the wind howled outside, masking the sound of the metal clicking into the lock of the cell door. Click! The cell door groaned open. Elara stepped inside. The smell of burnt fur and ozone was overwhelming. Being this close to a predator of this size should have terrified her. The wolf's head came up to her chest even while he was lying down. One snap of his jaws could take her head off. "I'm going to take the chains off," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Please don't kill me." The wolf remained perfectly still, though she could see his muscles trembling from the effort of holding back the pain. She knelt in the dirty straw. The silver chains were wrapped tight. She found the master link on the collar. As she brought the key toward it, she hesitated. "Why did Silas do this to you?" she murmured. She twisted the key. The mechanism was stiff with rust and cold. She gritted her teeth, using both hands, putting her entire body weight into the turn. Snap! The collar clicked open. The heavy silver fell away from the wolf's neck, clattering loudly onto the stone floor. The relief was instantaneous. The wolf took a ragged, deep breath, the first one free of restriction. But there were still cuffs on his paws. "Hurry!" Elara told herself. "He could come back." She moved to the front paws. Click, clatter. She moved to the back paws. Click, clatter. The wolf was free. Elara scrambled back, suddenly realizing the reality of her situation. She was locked in a dungeon with an unbound monster. She backed up until her back hit the cold stone wall. "Go!" she said, pointing to the open door. "Run, before they kill us both." The wolf stood up. He was colossal. He shook his massive body, sending dust and loose fur flying. He stretched his joints, popping. Then he turned those golden eyes on her. He didn't run. He stalked toward her. Elara stopped breathing. "Please," she squeaked. "I saved you." The wolf stopped inches from her. He lowered his massive head and sniffed her neck right where her pulse fluttered like a trapped bird. His wet nose was cold, but his breath was hot. He inhaled her scent deep into his lungs. Then the sound of crunching bones filled the small cell. Elara squeezed her eyes shut, expecting to be eaten. But the sound wasn't him biting her. It was the sound of shifting. The fur retracted. The snout shortened. The massive paws reshaped into hands. The heat radiating from him increased tenfold. "Open your eyes, Elara." The voice was deep, rough like gravel and velvet. It commanded obedience, and it knew her name. She opened her eyes. Standing before her, stark, naked, and unashamed, was a man. He was towering easily, 6'5", with broad shoulders corded with muscle and covered in faint white scars. His hair was the same midnight black as the wolf's fur hanging in damp shags over his forehead, but the eyes remained the same. Molten gold. He placed a large, calloused hand against the stone wall beside her head, boxing her in. He didn't look like a prisoner anymore. He looked like a king reclaiming his throne. How? Elara stammered, trying to avert her gaze from his nakedness, but failing. How do you know my name? I heard the guards saying it when they threw scraps at me, he said. His voice was dangerously calm. They called you rat. They called you nothing. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. They were wrong. He brought his other hand up and cupped her cheek. His thumb traced her bottom lip. The touch seared her skin hotter than any fire. You have no idea what you've just done. Little wolf, he whispered. I freed you. Now go. I cannot go. He rumbled, his eyes dropping to her lips. Not without you. What? No. I work here. I can't leave. He let out a dark, humorless laugh. You think I'm leaving my mate in the hands of the filth that chained me? Elara's world stopped. Mate. The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Wolves only had one mate. It was a sacred biological bond that couldn't be broken. But she was human. It was impossible. I'm human, she denied breathlessly. I can't be your mate. Your blood says otherwise, he growled softly. And my soul knows it. Suddenly, a loud clang echoed from the top of the stairs. The iron grate was being thrown open. Who's down there? The voice belonged to Alpha Silas. Elara's blood ran cold. Oh God, he's here! Hide! The stranger didn't flinch. A cruel, predatory smile curled his lips. He turned toward the stairs, shielding Elara with his massive body. Let him come, the man said, his voice dropping to a lethal growl. I have a score to settle. No! Elara grabbed his arm. He's an alpha. He has a whole pack. You're weak. You're injured. The man looked back at her. I am Kalen Thorn, and I am not an alpha Elara. He turned fully toward the approaching footsteps. I am the Alpha King. The name hit Elara like a physical blow. Kalen Thorn, the Alpha King, the ruler of the Iron Claw Kingdom, the sovereign over all packs on the continent. He had been missing for 6 months. Rumors said he was dead, killed in a coup. No one suspected he was rotting in the basement of a mid-level pack in the middle of nowhere. And she had just bonded with him. Silas descended the stairs, flanked by Jax and 2 other enforcers. They held torches, casting long, dancing shadows against the damp walls. I smelled a rat, Silas sneered, stopping halfway down. He squinted into the gloom of the cell. Elara, did you think you could feed the beast extra portions without me knowing? Silas stepped closer to the bars, not yet realizing the cell door was open. He held the torch up. The light illuminated the empty chains on the floor. Silas's eyes widened. What have you done? Then Kalen stepped into the light. The fear that flashed across Silas's face was primal. He stumbled back, dropping the torch. Impossible. The silver, it should have killed your wolf side by now. You underestimated my tolerance for pain, Silas. Kalen said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made the stones vibrate. And you made a fatal error. And what is that? Silas snarled, shifting his stance, his claws extending. His guards did the same, growling low in their throats. You let her touch me. Kalen didn't wait. He moved with a speed that blurred the air. He didn't shift back into a wolf. He didn't need to. He launched himself at the 2 guards. The fight was brutal and short. Kaelin caught the first guard by the throat, lifting him off the ground with one hand and slamming him into the stone wall with a sickening crunch. The guard crumpled unconscious or worse. Jax lunged, aiming a clawed swipe at Kaelin's exposed chest. Kaelin caught Jax's wrist mid-air, twisting it until the bone snapped. Jax screamed, but Kaelin silenced him with a backhand that sent the beta flying across the room, crashing into the rusty bars of an adjacent cell. Now it was just Kaelin and Silas. Silas was a powerful alpha, but Kaelin was a king. The power differential was palpable. The air in the dungeon grew heavy, charged with alpha energy that made Elara dizzy. She pressed herself against the wall knees, weak. "You think you can take me in human form?" Silas roared, his eyes glowing red. "You're weak-starved." "I have something worth fighting for now," Kaelin replied. Silas glanced past Kaelin, his eyes landing on Elara. A sick realization dawned on him. He sniffed the air. "Sandalwood and winter rain. You mated her the human servant." Silas threw his head back and laughed. "The Alpha King mated to a debt slave. It's poetic. I'll kill her first then. Watch you break." Silas shifted, his clothes shredded as he transformed into a massive grey wolf. He didn't attack Kaelin. He feinted left and lunged straight for Elara. "No!" Kaelin roared. Elara screamed, throwing her hands up to protect her face. She saw the grey wolf's jaws opening, the yellow teeth descending, but they never reached her. Kaelin intercepted the tackle mid-air. He didn't shift. He tackled the wolf with human hands, slamming Silas into the ground. Kaelin's roar was more animal than human. He mounted the grey wolf, his hands gripping the wolf's throat, squeezing with crushing force. "Touch her!" Kaelin snarled his eyes, burning with golden fire. "And I will tear your soul from your body." Silas thrashed claws, raking down Kaelin's sides, drawing blood. Kaelin didn't even flinch. He tightened his grip. Silas began to whimper, the oxygen cutting off. "Kaelin!" Elara cried out. "More are coming." She could hear it, the howl of the pack alarm. Silas must have mind-linked them before he shifted. Dozens of wolves were running toward the ruins. Kaelin looked up, his face streaked with blood, some Silas's. He looked at Elara, then at the door. He couldn't fight 100 wolves in his condition, not while protecting her. He released Silas's throat, grabbing the grey wolf by the scruff and throwing him violently into the open cell. Kaelin slammed the door shut and twisted the key, locking Silas in the very prison he had built. "We leave. Now," Kaelin commanded. He grabbed Elara's hand. His grip was iron-tight, but careful not to crush her. He pulled her toward the stairs. "Where are we going?" Elara gasped, struggling to keep up with his long strides, as they burst out of the ruins into the snowy night. The forest was alive with howls. Torches were bobbing in the distance, moving fast toward them. Kaelin looked at the dense, frozen forest ahead. He looked down at Elara. He pulled her close, wrapping his bare, bleeding arms around her, to shield her from the wind. "We are going to run, Elara. And if you fall, I will carry you. But we do not stop until we cross the border." He paused, looking deep into her eyes. "Do you trust me?" Elara looked at the man. She had just met the king. She had saved the monster who had just destroyed 3 men for her. "I trust you," she whispered. "Good." Kaelin grinned a wild, dangerous look. "Then hold on tight." The cold was a physical weight, pressing down on Elara's lungs, until every breath felt like inhaling broken glass. They had been running for an hour, but it felt like a lifetime. The forest behind the Blackwood estate was a labyrinth of ancient pines and treacherous ravines, currently buried under 3 feet of fresh snow. Elara stumbled her boot, catching on a hidden root. She pitched forward, bracing for the impact of the frozen ground, but strong arms caught her before she fell. "Easy!" Kaelin rasped. Ilara looked up at him. The Alpha King was in bad shape. The adrenaline of the fight in the dungeon was fading, replaced by the grim reality of his condition. He was still naked, his skin pale against the darkness of the forest, save for the angry red burns where the silver chains had seared him. He was shivering, a violent, uncontrollable tremor that rattled his bones. Wolves ran hot, their body temperature naturally higher than humans, but the silver poisoning stripped away his natural defenses. "We have to stop," Ilara pleaded, her teeth chattering. "You're freezing to death. You need clothes. You need heat." "If we stop, we die," Kalen gritted out. He scanned the tree line, his golden eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "Silas's trackers are close. I can smell them. Wet dog and desperation." "You can't keep going like this," Ilara argued, pulling off her oversized wool coat. "Here, put this on." Kalen looked at the coat, then at her shivering form. He pushed it back gently. "Keep it. If you get hypothermia, I can't heal you. I will heal. Eventually." "You're stubborn," she huffed, throwing the coat back over her shoulders, though she wished she could wrap him in it. "I am a king," he smirked weakly. "Stubbornness is a job requirement." A howl cut through the air, close, too close, less than a mile back. Kalen's expression hardened. The playfulness vanished. He grabbed Ilara by the shoulders, his grip urgent. "Listen to me. We are coming up on the gorge. There is a bridge, an old logging crossing. Once we cross it, I can destroy it. It will buy us time." "Can you make it?" she asked, eyeing the fresh blood trickling from the wounds Silas had inflicted on his torso. "For you, I could run to the ends of the earth." He didn't wait for a response. He scooped her up into his arms bridal style. "Kalen, put me down. I'm too heavy." "You weigh nothing," he growled, breaking into a sprint. Even injured, even poisoned by silver, Kalen Thorne was a force of nature. He moved through the snow with a terrifying speed, his bare feet leaving deep impressions. Ilara buried her face in the crook of his neck, seeking warmth. He smelled of rain pine and the metallic tang of blood. It was an intoxicating scent that made her head spin. "Mate." The word echoed in her mind. She didn't understand it fully. She knew the stories, of course, the fated connection, the soul binding. But she was a nobody, a servant girl with no family name and a mountain of debt. How could she be the destined partner of the most powerful being on the continent? They burst out of the tree line and onto the edge of a cliff. Below them, a river raged, black and churning, fighting against the ice. Spanning the gap was a rotting wooden bridge, swaying precariously in the wind. "Go," Kalen said, setting her down. "Run across. Do not look down. You're coming right behind me." Immediately. Ilara stepped onto the bridge. The wood groaned under her weight. She gripped the rope railing, the icy fibers biting into her palms. 1 step. 2. The wind whipped her hair into her face, blinding her. She was halfway across when Kalen stepped onto the bridge. "There he is!" a voice screamed from the tree line. Ilara whipped her head around. Emerging from the forest was Jax, his arm hanging at an unnatural angle from where Kalen had broken it, but his good hand holding a crossbow. Behind him were 3 wolves in shifted form. "Shoot him!" Jax screamed. Kalen roared, turning to face them on the narrow bridge. He blocked the path to Ilara. "Kalen!" Ilara screamed. Jax fired. The bolt whistled through the air. Kalen moved to dodge, but the bridge swayed violently. The bolt struck him in the shoulder, burying itself deep. Kalen grunted, staggering back, but he didn't fall. He looked at the bolt, then at Jax. He reached up and snapped the shaft off, leaving the head inside. "Is that the best you have?" Kalen mocked, blood streaming down his chest. The 3 wolves charged onto the bridge. "Ilara, run!" Kalen bellowed without looking back. I'm not leaving you. Run, damn it. Kalen crouched, and for a second the air shimmered. He didn't fully shift, he didn't have the energy, but his hands morphed into claws, his teeth elongated. He met the charge of the first wolf, catching it by the throat and throwing it off the side of the bridge. The wolf yelped as it plummeted into the icy river below. The weight of the wolves plus Kalen was too much for the rotting wood. The bridge groaned, a loud cracking sound echoing through the gorge. "Kalen, the ropes!" Elara screamed. The main support rope on the left side snapped. The bridge tilted violently. Elara lost her footing, sliding toward the edge. She grabbed a plank, her legs dangling over the abyss. Elara, Kalen abandoned the fight. He scrambled up the tilted bridge claws, digging into the wood. The remaining 2 wolves slid past him, unable to find purchase, and fell screaming into the dark water. Kalen reached Elara just as the second rope began to fray. He grabbed her wrist, his grip bruising. With a heave of superhuman strength, he hauled her up and threw her onto the solid ground of the far bank. He was still on the bridge. "Jump!" she screamed, reaching for him. Jax, still on the other side, loaded another bolt. He aimed not at Kalen, but at the final rope holding the bridge to the cliff. "Long live the king!" Jax sneered. He fired. The bolt severed the rope. The bridge collapsed. Kalen launched himself into the air, just as the wood fell away beneath him. It was an impossible jump, 30 feet of open air. Elara screamed, scrambling forward. Kalen's hands slammed into the edge of the cliff. He hung there, feet dangling over the drop muscles, straining. "Help me!" Elara cried, grabbing his forearms. She dug her heels into the snow, pulling with everything she had. "Don't you dare let go Kalen Thorne! Don't you dare!" He looked up at her, his face, pale eyes, heavy. "You are very bossy. For a servant." He wheezed. With a grunt of effort, he kicked against the cliff face and hauled himself up, rolling onto the snow beside her. They lay there for a moment, gasping for air, the sound of the crashing bridge echoing below. Kalen turned his head to look at her. He reached out a shaking hand and touched her face. "You didn't run," he whispered, sounding awed. "I told you." Elara choked out, tears freezing on her cheeks. "I trust you." Kalen tried to smile, but his eyes rolled back in his head. The adrenaline crash, combined with the silver poisoning and the crossbow wound, finally took its toll. The Alpha King went limp in the snow. Elara didn't have time to panic. Panic was a luxury for people who weren't freezing to death on the side of a mountain with an unconscious monarch. She slapped Kalen's cheek. "Wake up, you cannot sleep here." "Kalen." He groaned but didn't wake. He was burning up. The heat radiating from him was alarming. His body was fighting the toxins in overdrive. Elara looked around frantically. The storm was worsening. They needed shelter immediately. She remembered the stories old Martha the cook used to tell about the logging trails. There are way stations, she had said. Old cabins for the lumberjacks during the winter hauls. They keep them stocked with dry wood. She scanned the tree line. About 100 yards away, half buried in a snowdrift, was a slanted roof. "Okay," she muttered. "Okay. We can do this." She couldn't carry him. He was over 200 pounds of muscle, but she could drag him. She grabbed him under the arms, gritting her teeth. "Sorry about this, Your Majesty." It took her 20 minutes to move him the 100 yards. By the time they reached the cabin door, Elara's lungs were burning and her legs felt like jelly. She kicked the door open. It was small, dusty, and smelled of pine resin, but it was dry. There was a stone fireplace, a moth-eaten rug, and a stack of dry logs in the corner. She dragged Kalen inside and kicked the door shut, sealing out the howling wind. She worked on autopilot. She found flint and steel on the mantel, a stroke of luck. Within minutes, she had a fire roaring in the hearth. The orange glow lit up the small room, casting long shadows. She turned her attention to Kalen. He was shivering violently now, his teeth clicking together. The silver sickness was setting in. She needed to get the crossbow bolt out, and she needed to get his temperature down or up. She wasn't sure. "Kalen," she whispered, kneeling beside him. She checked the wound in his shoulder. It had stopped bleeding his werewolf healing, trying to close the skin around the foreign object. "This is going to hurt," she said, though he couldn't hear her. She gripped the end of the broken bolt. Taking a deep breath, she pulled. Kalen roared his back, arching off the floor, his eyes flying open. They weren't gold anymore. They were entirely black. The wolf was surfacing to deal with the pain. "It's out, it's out!" Elara cried, pressing a piece of her torn petticoat against the wound. "Look at me! Kalen, look at me!" He blinked, the black receding, the gold returning. He focused on her face, his breathing ragged. "Elara," he breathed. "I'm here. We're safe. We're in a cabin." He tried to sit up, but she pushed him back down. "Lie still. The silver poison. You're feverish." "Cold," he muttered. "Freezing." He was sweating, yet his skin felt like ice to the touch. His body was shutting down. "I need to warm you up," Elara said. She looked around. There were no blankets, just the rug and the fire. She looked at Kalen. He was watching her, his gaze hazy but intense. "Body heat," he whispered. "It's the only way. Skin to skin." Elara felt a blush creep up her neck. He was naked. She was fully clothed. "If I don't," he said, his voice faltering, "my heart will stop. The silver, it slows the blood." Elara swallowed hard. It was a medical necessity. That's what she told herself. She took off her heavy coat, then her boots, then her servant's dress. She left her thin chemise on. She couldn't bring herself to be entirely bare, and lay down on the rug beside him. She pulled the heavy wool coat over both of them and pressed her body against his. The shock of his cold skin made her gasp. He was like a marble statue. But as she wrapped her arms around his torso, burying her face in his chest, she felt him react. His arms came around her, pulling her closer, tangling his legs with hers. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling deeply. "Better," he murmured against her scalp. "Much better." They lay there for a long time, the fire crackling nearby. Slowly, warmth began to return to Kalen's body. His shivering subsided. "Elara." "Yes, why did you do it?" She shifted so she could look at him. His face was inches from hers. The firelight danced in his golden eyes. "Do what? Risk your life for a monster." "You're not a monster," she said softly. "Silas, Jax, they are monsters. They enjoy hurting people. You just looked sad." Kalen let out a low rumble of a laugh. "Sad I am the Alpha King. I am feared from the Iron Mountains to the Sea of Glass. I am not sad." "You were in that cell," she countered bravely. "You looked lonely." Kalen went quiet. He studied her face, tracing the line of her jaw with his eyes. He admitted, his voice barely audible. "I was betrayed, Elara, by my own brother Sterling. He's the one who drugged me and sold me to Silas. He wanted the throne. He thought if he sent me far enough away, bound in silver, I would rot and die." "Your brother," Elara gasped. "Family is a fickle thing among wolves," he said bitterly. "Power corrupts. I had given up, Elara. I was waiting to die in that darkness. And then you opened the door." He moved his hand, his fingers brushing the hair back from her forehead. The touch was tender, revered. "When a wolf finds his mate," Kalen whispered, "it is not just about love. It is about balance. The wolf is chaos. The mate is the anchor. Without you, I was drifting. With you, I am grounded." "But I'm human," Ilara whispered, her insecurities bubbling up. A human can't be a true mate to an alpha. It's biologically impossible. The books are written by old men who fear what they don't understand. Kaelin interrupted. There have been cases, rare, ancient, where the moon goddess pairs a wolf with a human because the bloodline requires it. He leaned in closer, sniffing her neck again. He frowned slightly. "What is it?" she asked. "Your scent," he murmured. "Underneath the fear and the soap, there is something else, something dormant. It smells like ozone, like the air before a storm." Ilara frowned. "I'm just Ilara. My father was a drunk and my mother died when I was born." "Perhaps," Kaelin said. "Or perhaps there is more to your story than you know." He closed the distance between them. He didn't kiss her, not yet. He just pressed his forehead against hers. "Sleep, Ilara. Tomorrow we hunt. Tomorrow we begin the journey to the capital to take back my kingdom. But tonight, you are my savior, and I am yours." Ilara closed her eyes, wrapped in the arms of the most dangerous man in the world, and for the first time in her life, she felt completely and utterly safe. But outside the cabin in the shadows of the trees, a pair of glowing purple eyes watched the smoke rise from the chimney. Silas hadn't come alone, and he wasn't the only one hunting them. The Iron Claw capital was not a city of wood and stone. It was a fortress of steel and fear. Built into the side of the obsidian mountain, it was a place where the weak were eaten and the strong ruled with cruelty. For 3 days, Kaelin and Ilara had traveled in the shadows. They had hijacked a supply truck sleeping in the back, amongst crates of grain, sharing body heat and whispered promises. Kaelin healed fast. By the time they saw the smoke of the capital, his scars were silver lines on his skin, and his strength had returned tenfold. But his eyes were harder, colder, except when he looked at her. "Stay close to me," Kaelin murmured, as they walked through the crowded lower markets. They were disguised in heavy cloaks, hoods drawn low. "Sterling will have guards everywhere. They think you're dead," Ilara whispered, clutching his arm. "Look." She pointed to a massive banner hanging from the castle walls. It was black, bearing the sigil of the wolf, but the eyes on the banner were painted purple. "Sterling has already claimed the pack," Kaelin growled, his jaw tightening. "He is holding the Ascension ceremony tonight." The Ascension was a brutal ritual. The new Alpha King would don the Corona Argentum, the silver crown. It was an ancient artifact laced with moon magic. It tested the king. If he was worthy, it granted him immense power. If he was weak, it burned him. But Sterling had likely found a way to cheat the test, just as he had cheated his brother. "We have to get into the palace," Ilara said. "The servants' entrance." Kaelin nodded. "I used to sneak out that way when I was a pup. It leads directly to the kitchens and from there the throne room." The infiltration was tense. They slipped past the outer guards, utilizing Kaelin's intimate knowledge of the castle's blind spots. But as they moved through the damp stone corridors, Ilara felt a strange sensation, a buzzing in her fingertips, a headache that throbbed in time with her heartbeat. "Are you all right?" Kaelin asked, pulling her into a shadowy alcove as a patrol marched past. "I feel strange," she admitted, "like the air is vibrating." Kaelin sniffed the air. "Magic. Sterling has warlocks in the castle. He's protected the throne room with wards to prevent shifters from entering uninvited." "Then how will you get in?" Kaelin looked at her, his golden eyes fierce. "I will tear the wards down if I have to, but we are running out of time." They reached the heavy oak doors of the great hall. Inside, they could hear the roar of a crowd. Thousands of wolves had gathered to watch Sterling take the throne. "Ilara," Cailan said, turning to her. He took her face in his hands. "Whatever happens in there, you stay behind me. If things go wrong, you run, and you don't look back." "I'm not leaving you," she said stubbornly. "Promise me," he hissed urgently. "I can fight an army, but I cannot fight if I am worried about you." "I promise," she lied. Cailan took a deep breath. He dropped his cloak, revealing his bare chest and the dark trousers they had stolen. He looked every inch the barbarian king, wild, scarred, and lethal. He kicked the doors open. Boom! The sound echoed like a cannon shot. The great hall went silent. Thousands of heads turned. At the far end of the hall, standing on a dais raised high above the crowd, was Sterling. He looked like a polished version of Cailan Cleaner, sharper, but with cruel, glowing purple eyes. He was holding the silver crown in his hands, about to place it on his head. "Sterling!" Cailan's voice thundered, rolling over the crowd like a shockwave. Sterling froze. He lowered the crown slowly, a smirk spreading across his face. "Brother!" Sterling called out, his voice amplified by the acoustics of the hall. "You're late. I almost started the party without you." "You sit on a throne of lies," Cailan shouted, walking down the center aisle. The crowd parted for him, gasps of, "The king lives!" and "It's Cailan!" rippling through the room. "I challenge you for it." "A challenge?" Sterling laughed. "Look at you. You're filthy. You smell of human." Sterling's eyes snapped to Ilara, who was trailing behind Cailan. "And you brought a pet," Sterling sneered. "How quaint. Is that the little rat who let you out of your cage? Her name is Ilara." Cailan growled, stopping at the base of the dais. "And she is my queen." The crowd gasped. A human queen. It was unheard of. "Queen!" Sterling cackled. "She is a liability." Sterling snapped his fingers. Suddenly the floor beneath Ilara glowed with purple runes. "Cailan!" She screamed. A magical barrier shot up around her, a cage of violet light. Cailan lunged for her, but the light repelled him, burning his skin. "Don't touch it, brother," Sterling warned. "That is a warlock's cage, designed to hold pests. Now let's settle this, wolf to wolf." Sterling leapt from the dais, shifting in mid-air. He was a massive wolf, his fur a mix of grey and silver, his eyes burning purple. Cailan didn't hesitate. He shifted his midnight black form, colliding with Sterling's grey bulk. The fight was a blur of violence. Claws met flesh teeth, met bone. Cailan was stronger, but he was still recovering from the silver poisoning. Sterling was fresh and fueled by dark magic. Ilara pounded on the magical barrier. "Let me out, Cailan!" She watched helplessly as Sterling landed a vicious bite on Cailan's shoulder, the same shoulder that had been injured by the crossbow. Cailan stumbled. Sterling capitalized, slamming Cailan into the stone pillars. The hall shook. Cailan fell, reverting to human form, bleeding heavily. Sterling shifted back, standing over his brother, panting. "You were always the stronger one, Cailan." Sterling spat, wiping blood from his lip. "But you were always too soft. You cared about honor, about mercy, and now you care about her." Sterling turned toward Ilara's cage. He walked toward her, a dagger made of pure silver in his hand. "I think I'll kill her first," Sterling said, casually. "Just so you can hear her scream." "No." Cailan roared, trying to rise, but he was too battered. Sterling raised the dagger. He stepped through the magical barrier, he controlled the wards, and grabbed Ilara by the throat. The cold silver blade pressed against her neck. "Any last words, rat?" Sterling hissed. Ilara couldn't breathe. She looked at Cailan, who was dragging himself across the floor, desperation in his eyes. She looked at the silver dagger, and then something inside her snapped. The buzzing in her fingertips turned into a roar. The smell of ozone exploded in the room. She didn't feel fear anymore. She felt recognition. Elara reached up and grabbed the blade of the silver dagger with her bare hand. Sterling's eyes widened. "What are you doing? You'll slice your hand open." But blood didn't flow. Instead, the silver dagger began to glow. Not the angry red of a weapon, but a blinding, pure white. "You hold this weapon," Elara said, her voice echoing with a power that wasn't her own. "But you do not own it." The great hall fell into a silence so profound it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. The only sound was the ragged breathing of Kalen, broken and bleeding on the stone floor, and the manic, triumphant laughter of his brother Sterling. Sterling stood inside the shimmering violet cage of the ward, the silver dagger pressed intimately against the hollow of Elara's throat. A single bead of blood welled up where the metal kissed her skin, rolling down her neck like a tear. "Look at him, Elara," Sterling whispered, his breath hot against her ear. He gestured with his free hand toward Kalen, who was struggling to push himself up his limbs, trembling from the beating. "The great Alpha King. He can't break the wards. He can't save you. He is nothing but a dog who forgot his master." "Let her go, Sterling." Kalen roared, the sound tearing from his throat, raw and guttural. He slammed his fist against the magical barrier, his skin sizzling as the wards burned him, but he didn't stop. He hit it again. And again. "Take me, kill me. Just let her go." "Oh, I will kill you, brother," Sterling sneered. "But first I'm going to break the toy that gave you hope." Sterling tightened his grip on the dagger. Elara felt the cold bite of the edge. She squeezed her eyes shut, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She thought of her father, of the debt of the cold dungeon floor. She thought of Kalen's golden eyes in the dark, the way he had looked at her in the cabin, not as a servant, but as a savior. "I am not a victim," a voice whispered in the back of her mind. It wasn't her voice. It sounded ancient, echoing like wind through a canyon. "I am the metal. I am the moon." The buzzing in Elara's fingertips, which had started when they entered the castle, suddenly spiked into a deafening roar. It felt as if lightning had struck the base of her spine. When Sterling moved to slice her throat, Elara didn't cringe. She didn't scream. She moved. Her hand shot up faster than humanly possible and grabbed the blade of the silver dagger. The crowd gasped. Sterling froze his eyes, widening in shock. "Are you insane? You'll lose your fingers." But there was no blood. As Elara's skin touched the pure silver, a shockwave blasted through the hall. The candles in the chandeliers flickered and died, plunging the room into shadow, save for the light now emanating from Elara's hand. The silver didn't cut her. It recognized her. The blade began to hum, a high-pitched, resonant frequency that made the teeth of every wolf in the room ache. The solid metal softened, turning from a rigid weapon into a fluid, living substance. It rippled like mercury, flowing over Elara's fingers, coating her hand in a glove of liquid moonlight. "What? What is this?" Sterling stammered, trying to pull away. He couldn't. The weapon he held was no longer his. It was fused to Elara's grip. Elara opened her eyes. The warm chocolate brown was gone. Her irises were now pools of swirling, molten quicksilver. When she spoke, her voice was layered, carrying the weight of 1,000 ancestors. "You hold the metal of the moon," Elara said, her voice vibrating through the stone floor. "But you do not know its song." "Which?" Sterling shrieked, finally releasing the hilt and stumbling back. "She's a witch, guards! Kill her!" The guards rushed forward, spears raised. Elara didn't flinch. She swept her hand through the air. The liquid silver on her hand lashed out, extending into a long, glowing whip of pure light. It cracked through the air, shattering the violet magical barrier Sterling's warlocks had erected, as if it were made of sugar glass. The shards of magic dissolved into sparkles. Ilara stepped out of the cage, the silver whip coiling around her arm like a loyal serpent. "I am not a witch," Ilara declared, stepping towards Sterling. "I am the Argenta." The word hit the crowd like a physical blow. Elders in the front row dropped to their knees, their faces pale. "The Argenta!" An old wolf whispered, his voice trembling. "The keepers. The judges. I thought they were extinct." "Impossible," Sterling yelled, backing up until he hit the throne. "The Argenta died out in the First War. You are just a cleaning girl. The bloodline does not die," Ilara said, continuing her advance. "It hides. It waits for a king worthy of protection, and it waits for a tyrant worthy of judgment." Sterling, desperate and terrified, shifted. His bones cracked as he forced the transformation, turning into his massive grey wolf form. He snarled, foam dripping from his mouth, and lunged at Ilara jaws, aiming for her head. "No!" Kaelin screamed. Ilara didn't run. She raised her silver-clad hand. The liquid metal shot forward, not as a whip this time, but as a net. It expanded mid-air, wrapping around the grey wolf's muzzle, his paws, his torso. It was the silver chains, just like the ones that had bound Kaelin. But these were not forged in a fire. They were summoned from her very soul. Sterling crashed to the ground, writhing and whimpering. The silver seared his fur, neutralizing his alpha power instantly. He wasn't just captured, he was dominated. Ilara turned away from the whimpering usurper. The glow in her eyes softened, but the power radiating from her remained immense. She looked across the hall to where Kaelin lay. He was staring at her with an expression of pure, unadulterated awe. He was the Alpha King, the predator at the top of the food chain, yet he looked at her as if she were a goddess descended from the stars. Ilara ran to him, the silver on her hand, receding back into her skin, leaving only a faint, shimmering residue. She slid to her knees, lifting his head into her lap. "Kaelin," she whispered, her voice returning to normal, cracking with emotion. "Stay with me." "Ilara," he rasped, blood coating his teeth. You are." "Shh." She placed her hands on his chest, right over the wounds Sterling had inflicted. "You took the silver poison for weeks. You survived it because you are strong. But now, let the silver heal you." She closed her eyes and pushed. She didn't know how she did it. It was instinct buried deep in her DNA. She felt the silver elements in the atmosphere in her blood, and she channeled them into him. Usually, silver destroyed wolves, but Ilara's silver was pure. It acted as a conductor. Kaelin gasped, his back arching off the floor. Golden light erupted from his chest, mingling with the white light of her hands. The gashes on his torso knit together before their eyes. The bruising on his face vanished. His energy returned in a rush, the alpha aura exploding outward, strong enough to make the nearest guard stumble back. Kaelin sat up, fully healed, his power magnified by her touch. He looked at his hands, then at her. He reached out, cupping her face, treating her like she was made of fragile glass. "I knew you were my mate," he whispered, his thumb stroking her cheek. "But I didn't know you were my destiny." He stood up, pulling her with him. The entire hall was watching them, thousands of wolves, silent and waiting. Kaelin walked to the dais where Sterling lay bound and whining. He stepped over his brother and picked up the Corona Argentum, the silver crown. He turned to the crowd. He held the crown up, but he didn't put it on. "A king cannot rule without balance," Kaelin's voice boomed. "For generations we have ruled with claw and fang, and we have bled for it. We forgot the old ways. We forgot the Argenta. He turned to Elara. He held the crown out to her. Kaelin, she whispered, I can't. I'm human. You are more than human, he said firmly. You are the only one who can hold the leash. Place it on me, Elara. If you accept me as your king, I will serve you as my queen. With trembling hands, Elara took the heavy silver crown. She raised it high. Kaelin lowered his head, bowing before her, a submission no alpha had ever shown a human. She placed the crown on his brow. As the metal touched him, a beam of moonlight pierced the stained glass window of the great hall, illuminating them both in a celestial spotlight. I crown you, Kaelin Thorne, Elara announced, her voice ringing with steel. The true king. The silence broke. It started with Jax the Beta, who had hunted them, dropping to one knee, head bowed low, then the guards, then the nobles. Finally, the entire hall was kneeling. Long live the king, the chant began, shaking the foundations of the castle. Long live the Argenta. Kaelin rose, the crown gleaming on his head. He didn't look at the crowd. He pulled Elara flush against his body, his arm wrapping possessively around her waist. Let them kneel. He growled softly, his golden eyes burning with a mix of triumph and desire. Let them bow. But know this, Elara. I only kneel for you. He captured her lips in a searing, claiming kiss that promised a rain of fire and moonlight. Elara melted into him, no longer the servant girl who scrubbed floors, but the woman who had tamed the beast and the only one who could ever set him free. And that is the end of She Freed a Wolf Bound in Silver Chains. Can you believe that twist? I honestly thought she was just a regular human, until the dagger started glowing. The lore of the Argenta really ties everything together. It explains why she could unlock the chains in Chapter 1 without getting burned. Kaelin and Elara are definitely one of the ultimate power couples now. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and tells me you want more long-form shifter romances like this one. If you found a werewolf locked in a dungeon, would you have risked your life to free him like Elara did? Let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. I'll see you in the next video with an even wilder twist. Stay wild, everyone.